All right, wow, this is a lot bigger than last year. So how many of you were here last year and saw me talk? Oh good, then you can already do this by yourselves. So I had a great time last year, and talking to you guys was just completely fascinating to me. And you know, it got a pretty big response, the talk. And I understand that when it was announced that I was going to be here and I walked in, I had some people come up to me and they looked a little bit nervous because in my talk, you know, I described the experience of, that I had in my second startup where we worked super hard for a number of years and got to the stage of doing our IPO, and my best friend and partner, we'd worked on this for 10 years, we've been working together for 10 years, and I told a story about how he, days before our $650 million IPO, suddenly died of a heart attack. This guy in perfect health. And it was a pretty dramatic experience and pretty transformative and changed how I think about startups. And so in doing that, last year I went and looked, and there were some tweets that came out like, let me see, I'm trying to advance, but it's not advancing. There we go. All right. There are some tweets that came out like this one. And so people were a little bit nervous, like, what are you going to do this year? There was even some Facebook posts about that. So I just want to be upfront with everybody and let you know that right before I came on stage, I did check on Facebook, and all of my friends are fine. No one else has died since last year, and so I don't think we have to go into to any of that this year. It's going to be happy stuff this year. We're going to talk about finding the big idea. So how many of you here actually think you have your big idea now? You know what it is. You're sure. Okay, some of you. And how many of you are still looking? Maybe you have a bunch of ideas, but you're not sure which one is the big winner. All right, more of you. Okay, that's good. You should always be questioning that. Well, this is going to be fun. So one key question is it the innovator? This is Larry Page. Or is it the idea? Right? What's more important? So Larry comes up with PageRank. It's a great idea. And I think the differentiation here is that it's both, right? Both are very important. But it's not just coming up with any idea. It's, let's see if this will advance. There we go. It's not just an idea. It needs to be your idea. So there's a difference in the idea that works for you, which means it fits with your skills, it fits with your resources, and most importantly, it fits with your passion. So a business idea, because a lot of people come and say, you know, I need a great business idea. And it's like, well, no, you need your great business idea, which is not going to be the same as somebody else's great business idea. Because as I've said before, ideas are a dime a dozen, and I would much rather have the Google team doing the pets.com idea than the pets.com team doing the Google idea. Because I think the Google team would figure out that there was something wrong with the idea of shipping 50 pounds of dog food to people as their business model, and they probably would have pivoted that before they'd blown through all their money. So it's both the entrepreneur and the idea. I think there's kind of a multiplication sign, you know, entrepreneur times idea value. And if the idea is a 0, doesn't matter how good the entrepreneur is, the output's going to be 0. And definitely, even if it's the world's best idea, if the entrepreneur is a 0, the output is going to be 0. So you have to have a good number in both columns, which is why building a team is so important. Let's see here. I'm going to try to advance again. There we go. So is innovation something that you're born with? There's been a lot of research on this, a question of nature versus nurture. And the answer is, there's not a precise answer, but it looks like, based on studies, that about 40% of your ability to be creative is in your DNA. And about 60% is actually learned. which is very fortunate for me because I don't think I got enough in my DNA, so I could just work hard and practice and overcome that. So, fundamental question, can we learn to think different, to use Steve's phrase? And I think the answer is yes, we can. So some academics went out. This guy, whose name is Clayton Christensen, he's a Harvard professor. He and some other university professors did a study over a period of about 6 years, looking at hundreds of innovators and tracking how they actually innovate and come up with their ideas. And this is fascinating because it's never really been studied before. We can, we have ideas and sort of thoughts about what might work, but nobody's ever gone and actually gotten the data. So now we actually have the data. The first thing we learned is that it's not sitting there and thinking. Innovation is not like, let me ponder the deep answer. Innovation is really a verb. You get out there and you connect with people. You're in motion. So when somebody's innovating, this is what they learned. The most innovative people were the ones that were out connecting, and they were connecting with different groups of people, different kinds of people. They were connecting across separate groups, and they were getting these different ideas and fundamentally associating these ideas. Associating is one of the keys. So disparate ideas and associating them together. So I'm going to talk about the first key thing they learned. Four key trends in this study about how to be a good innovator. Let me advance this. Here we go. First one is questioning. Entrepreneurs, in my experience, and I'm fortunate to know a bunch, are very curious people. When we meet people, we just ask a lot of questions. And my wife has gotten used to this. When I'm just out in the world and I meet somebody or we encounter a business, even going into a sandwich shop and they're making the sandwich, I just start asking questions. How's business? What's the break even? How many sandwiches do you guys need to sell in order to break even, cover your rent? I'm just buying a sandwich here. And I just, like entrepreneurs, and I've seen other entrepreneurs do this, we're just curious about this stuff. We think about it all the time. And my wife has gotten used to dealing with sitting in a restaurant and me talking about, like, what do you think their promotional costs are? Like, customer acquisition costs seem to be, like, skyrocketing here. It's probably why the food's not very good and it's too expensive. And so you're just always thinking this way. And so, I like to say that entrepreneurs are people that are broken in just the right way. And so that's part of that brokenness, I think, is this insatiable curiosity about how things work. As a little kid, most entrepreneurs like taking things apart. And so now, as we grow up, we start taking businesses apart to try to learn how it works. And you can do that just by traveling the world and browsing the internet and just sort of looking at, I read stories about like some company goes out of business or they're in financial trouble, and I'll just get curious, like, why? And I start browsing and trying to find the answer. And this starts informing me about their marketplace. And so I think questioning is really fundamental. And I want to throw out an idea for you guys to think about, which is, as you explore different concepts for your business, and you get to the point where you think you're narrowing in on something, and you think, like, this is really interesting, I want you to go out and question people who are your potential customers, and I want you to go out and question people that might be your competitor. Like, go look at those businesses, call them up, sign up for their service, and go through the experience of being a user. But there's another group that you can question that's important, which is all of your peers. Having that diversity of peers is really important. And I'm a big proponent of not keeping your idea a big secret. I don't think you have to buy a billboard and put out your idea, but I don't think there's any reason, if there's somebody in front of you that may have input or experience and be able to help you, it is much better to put your idea out there, because I go out and talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and people come up and say, Mark, I got this great idea. And I thought, oh yeah, what is it? Well, I can't tell you, it's secret. It's like, okay, more companies that I've seen go out of business because their idea wasn't well enough thought through than probably 100x than people that got their idea stolen. There's probably one or two examples maybe, but we all know that there are millions of examples of businesses that didn't make it. The reason why? Not enough data. So if people are willing to give you input, It's important to try to capture that input. So I'll give you another tip of a place to go to get input that really works great. And I do this all the time. I'm always thinking about businesses. I have a day job now. I sold my last startup to Adobe, so I work at Adobe now. But I'm always thinking about, like, wow, there's so many opportunities out there. There's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. So I kind of do like little experiments, and I sort of look at things. And one of the things I found that is super useful is I'm looking at a business. Most ideas have been done to some extent in some form. So I might be thinking about something that's different than what was done, but if I go and do careful research, I can usually find that there was some company that tried to do this. And a lot of times, because most startups fail, it's a failed company. Maybe they went and raised money, and they tried for a few years, and they failed. And now they've been out of business for a year or two. So I try to go read everything I can. Like, well, what was their idea, and how is it different than what I'm now thinking about? And what can I learn from their lesson? You could take this a step further. I go on LinkedIn, and I type in the company name. And I find people that used to work at the company that's now out of business. They have their resumes up there. They list, stuff. And I contact them and call them up. Say, hey, I'm thinking about a similar kind of business, and I'd love to go buy you lunch. And in some cases, I've flown across the US just to have lunch with somebody. And for the price of one plane ticket and that lunch, I learned from the head of sales of this company that tried for 3 years and spent $10 million of VC money. I learned that $10 million lesson for the price of one plane ticket and lunch, right? And so this is something you can do. Find that company. You could email them. Because a lot of times, they went through this painful experience of working really hard, trying to figure it out. They didn't quite make it. They're like willing to help. They're like, oh, you're thinking about this space, how cool. And they keep emailing me, oh, I thought of something else. And hey, I ran into another guy that used to work there, he could help you. And so I'm getting all of this information. I'm basically benefiting from the tuition. I'm getting the lesson for tuition that somebody else paid. And it's amazing what you can learn. So that's questioning. It's good to ask questions. Entrepreneurs always asking questions. In fact, here's an interesting thing. When you sit down and talk with a customer, I encourage you to set a timer, 15 minutes. You're not going to talk about your product for 15 minutes. You're going to ask questions about their life, their problems, their space, what's going on in their head. You're going to try to understand all of the adjacencies around their problem set, and then you can start talking about your product. So the next skill that these guys discovered in their study across hundreds of successful innovators is the skill of observing, active observing, carefully watching. And I think there's a great story that illustrates this. The chairman of Tata Group in India, they make a whole bunch, they're a big conglomerate, make a whole bunch of different things. One of the things they make is cars. And he was sitting at an intersection in 2003 in his car in Mumbai, and it was pouring rain, as it will do in Mumbai. And he saw a family going by on a motor scooter, a family of 4. So there's the dad sitting on the scooter, and standing in front and holding onto the handlebars was his son. And sitting side saddle right behind him was his wife, and on her lap she had a baby. So family of 4 in the pouring rain on this little motor scooter, because that's what they could afford. And he thought, like, there's a huge market of people that would love to have a car, they just can't afford it. So could we make a car affordable for these people? It's a huge market. And that's actually where the idea came from. So he set to investigating that idea and launched the most inexpensive car ever sold in India, and now it's a huge hit. Huge hit. And so I think that kind of observing, active observing, just always looking at the world around you is really important. Networking. So you guys are already here, networking, that's great. You need to maintain diverse sets of people, diverse networks. I try to, when I'm really thinking through an idea, I go out to lunch or dinner with people. I try to, I keep a lot of friendships with people, try to do them favors whenever I can so that when I call them up and say, hey, let's go to lunch, they know that, they're just waiting. We get through all the pleasantries. I'm like, so, do you ever think about, and I start going into this thing, try to get their reaction. It may be from a medical doctor, maybe from a plumber. I try to get this totally diverse set of people, and just talk it through with them. And that network really influences my thinking because I'm certainly not smart enough to figure it out on my own. And these people will help me. They think differently than I do. So that's why, the expression think different is so interesting, because I think it's a little bit of an illusion. One person can only do so much think different. The ultimate way to think different is to have different people helping you, because they already think differently than you do. All right, so the last one is experimenting. And this is incredibly important. You guys are, learning startup methodology about going out and trying experiments. And certainly, I've had some interesting successes and failures in experimenting. And the whole idea here is the quicker you can get to that failure, the better. So if it's going to fail, find out that it's going to fail fast. And I'm sure you guys have heard this. So experimenting is really profound, but there are interesting ways that you can do it. So I'm going to suggest something that I did in my last startup. For our first product, I had a team of engineers that were just getting ready to start at the company. They were leaving their former jobs crazily to join me in my back bedroom as we were starting the company. And I sat down and I created what I call a video prototype. And I used a bunch of different tools, in some cases using After Effects, to go frame by frame and create exactly what I thought the product would look like. So it's a video of the product actually working. And I would play it back full screen, and it was timed, so that the buttons would press and it would go to the next screen. So if I was sitting there with the mouse, I could literally pantomime, and I tested on my wife, and she thought that there was a working product here. She was like, oh, let me try, but the video just keeps playing. So it's like the complete experience of the product. And it was fascinating, because then when I sat down with the engineers, they got it. And, we had a spec, but they got it in a totally different way, actually seeing it. And then we went to a trade show. We didn't have much money, so we couldn't afford a booth, so we got a room in the hotel. And I knew some people in the industry, and so I just walked around the show and hey, you want to come and see something we're thinking about? Come up to the room. And I'd come up there and I'd show them this thing, and they were like, wow, is this a beta? Can I get it? And I didn't have the heart to tell them that we actually haven't started writing any code yet, because it looked like the finished product. But the things they said were amazing. They were like, well, I'm sure it does this. It's like, oh, we hadn't thought of that. Started writing it down. And so they started throwing out a lot of really good, interesting questions. And they would say, oh, I don't like that so much. Oh, really? Why? And I try to be good at doing the questioning thing and ask, things I should be asking. But the stuff they threw out was stuff I could have never asked. I would not have known. It facilitated the conversation in a way that was profound. So those are the 4 things that are, I think, powerful. And they're proven to be success factors for innovators. So the next thing is to try to find your big idea, is you could just try to predict the future. Seems easy. You get out your crystal ball, say this is what's going to happen. And you can go through things like the former CEO of IBM, I think it was back in the 50s, said the worldwide market for computers would be 3. And so obviously he was mapping forward something that turned out to be wrong. So my job is as a chief strategist. Does anybody know somebody that's a strategist? Yeah, nobody. See, there's not very many of us. Most people are smart enough not to ever get slapped with that title. But those of us that are strategists, we try to hang together. We have a little strategist club, and we get together, and we also have a strategist comedy club, and we go out, because there's only one strategist joke in all of technology, so we just hear the same joke over and over again. Do you guys want to see it? Now, if you know any strategists, you're going to know that the joke's not that funny. It's kind of slow, but here it is. Build, click. There we go. It's slow. It builds slowly, okay? See, strategists use trends, probably too much. So we just take what's happening today and we extrapolate it forward and say, there's your future. Doesn't work very well. This guy, I think, should have been a strategist. He was an American baseball player named Yogi Berra. And he said something truly brilliant. It's hard to make predictions, especially about the future. Often they're wrong. So we end up with things like this. The flying car, which we still don't have. And this was in 1944, and they were projecting what the world would be like in 1961. And you'd have a flying car like this, right? Turns out that it didn't actually happen that way. So let me apply that to some other technologies. You guys know this QR codes, right? How many people using QR codes? Use QR codes? All right, a lot of you, cool. So QR codes are pretty neat. But I happen to believe, as neat as they are today, they're not a long-term trend. So people are using them, like putting them on the sides of buildings, which is a weird way to geolocate. You can use it to try to just find friends by putting it on your shirt. Some people make a big commitment to the QR code technology, as they're big believers that this is going to really hang around. And I think they're going to be a little bit disappointed, but nothing matches this guy. He actually put a QR code, planned it before he died, to put a QR code that links to a website with information about his life and everything actually on his tombstone. And I just think that when his descendants come 50 years from now and look at the tombstone, they're going to be like, what is that weird, I don't get, is it a crossword puzzle? I don't know. And because I think the QR codes are going to fade away. Why? Well, because I think we have things like near-field technologies and just plain image recognition. We won't need this specially encoded image pretty soon. In a few years, let's imagine that our phones get way more sophisticated. They can know what we want to go to without us having to give them this weird binary code. So I kind of wouldn't make a big bet here. So taking that a little bit forward, you can think about trends in the industry. And I made this chart because I like to look at it and try to think about where these things are going to intersect. So this is like the periodic table of elements, but I'm taking trends that are out there that I think are influential, and I'm combining them together. So for instance, you could take up there in the corner like social plus mobile plus location. When you think about that, you might end up with something like Foursquare. And so you kind of think about these as building blocks of things that are going to evolve and put them together. And I think that can be a pretty useful way to try to think about the future, particularly when 2 or 3 of these things are on a collision course. I think there's opportunity to be found there. Now, this is technological. Typically, the biggest disruptions and the greatest value creations happen when you have, at the same moment, a big technology disruption, like one of these things, and a business model disruption together. That's typically in an industry where enormous value gets destroyed and created. It emerges in a new form, and that's an opportunity for small companies to move quickly and capture that new value as it emerges. So you can, there are lots of examples of this happening historically. And so kind of drawing out a map of how business models work and a map of how the technology works and trying to find those intersections is a pretty interesting way to start off a brainstorming session to try to find that future thing. So in closing, I wanted to share with you guys, let me advance here. I wanted to share with you an idea that I've been thinking about, and this actually was influenced by my trip to Romania last year and the time that I spent here and conversations I've had with people that I've met here since. And so I thought it would be appropriate to talk about it with you guys because we're all friends. And so this is a formative thought as I try to look at my big idea. What gets me passionate and excited? And as I was here in Romania, I got such an education because in the valley where I live, it's we're kind of in a bubble, right? We see the world in a different way in terms of like startups and technology. And coming out here to what I sort of think of as the real world, and seeing all of the entrepreneurial energy and excitement and hearing about the challenges really got me So I've been kind of grinding on this for a year and thinking about it. And I just thought, wow, there's an opportunity here to make a fundamental difference, I think. Because I talked about this last year. You guys know, I believe that entrepreneurship is the engine that drives the world, right? It creates wealth, creates prosperity, it drives education, and it even can, not just change lives, but it can change the world, like an entire country even, as businesses emerge in places in Africa where there may not be stabilized rule of law even. This is one of the things that economists say actually drive the creation of civil society. And so it's not just feeding people and creating wealth and educating them, it creates the structure of a functioning society. That's pretty powerful. And so I started thinking about that and saying, wow, if you want a big lever to try to move the world, that seems like a pretty good one. If we could get more startups happening. And Carlos and his organizations and also other incubators that are out there have great programs to train entrepreneurs. There are university programs, particularly in the US. Some of them are fantastic to train entrepreneurs to go out and start successful companies. But it occurred to me that we're not thinking big enough because they're doing it 30, 40, 50 startups at a time, a classroom size. And I do some lecturing at University of California. I have a graduate school of business management, and it's a beautiful 3- or 4-story building. And the other day I was standing in front of it talking to a guy that runs it, and I said, this building isn't big enough. And he said, well, why? And to me, the fundamental thing is that if we really want to drive change, we can't do it 20 or 30 at a time. And I started wondering, why do we do it 20 or 30 at a time? Well, that's what we can conveniently teach to people one-on-one. And because that sort of scarce resource of teaching people and funding people, we create this huge input funnel of small companies that, or startup ideas. They submit their business plan and they go through this gauntlet. It's like the Marine Corps, training course. We try to eliminate the weak, get rid of the bad ideas, even though we all admit that investors generally don't know for sure. But they try to narrow down to the cream of the crop because they only have so many seats. There's only 30 seats in our program, things like Y Combinator, Techstars. Great education, where else are you going to get to have dinner with Mark Zuckerberg? Fantastic. For a very few people that live in the right country or can afford to travel there and can pass the gauntlet and be accepted through all of the filters, they can have this fantastic experience. But what about the people that don't have that commitment? They're not sure yet that they really want to do this. Maybe they have a family to feed. Maybe they have a job they have to keep. Maybe they live in Manila or Bucharest or Warsaw. And they would like to have this experience. They'd like to have this knowledge because the knowledge is power to create a successful business. I think we have enough startups here, enough information to help them, people that are in the US, particularly in California and in New York. Wow, it's incredible. So what can we do here? And if we really scale up our thinking and say, well, we'd like to actually change this whole thing, how could we use the technology that we already leverage on the internet to provide as close to a perfect experience that a Y Combinator or a Techstars creates for the chosen few? How close could we get? Could we give 80% of that experience, 85% of that knowledge for free to somebody who can't leave Manila and only has from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. after his kids go to bed? He drives a taxi in the day. He has a dream, and I think his dream is no less valid, even though his dream may not be one that potentially will become a $100 million web business, so he may not gain the interest of the incubators that are kind of feeding a deal flow, But he needs that information because too many startups, and I'm now defining this widely, from a fruit cart to a manufacturing business to a web startup, too many of them die for the wrong reasons. Yeah, some of them are bad ideas, true, but other ones die simply from a lack of information. I see it happen even with businesses that I go to. Great restaurant goes out of business, why? They made great food, but they didn't understand controlling cost of customer acquisition and modeling that. They didn't understand that they have to be able to turn their data faster so that they can optimize their business. This is information that we know how to teach, it's widely available, and yet it's not connecting. So we have companies that don't get started, and even worse, we have companies that should have been started that aren't, because people can't see themselves succeeding in doing it. In Japan, it's not even very culturally accepted to be an entrepreneur at all. It's frowned upon. So you have this incredible resistance if you're thinking about doing it. So instead of having a gauntlet to eliminate the weak, it'd be nice to have a funnel to take them all in if we remove the scarcity of the costs. If we could make it free and provide all of the information and let entrepreneurs teach other entrepreneurs to make a scalable, automated system to provide not only videos, not only text, but actual interaction and even simulation, an online Skype pitch session so you can learn how to pitch, and you do it to other entrepreneurs who may be a little more experienced. My goal, could we do it and create 100,000? 1 million startups? How do we get there? If we say, all right, we want to create 100,000 new companies around the planet, we have to create 100,000 new entrepreneurs. And they're going to generate jobs, stability, and structure. And every startup, as we know from the Valley, throws off other startups. I don't know if this is a completely insane idea, but it seems to me it wouldn't cost very much to do, and we could make it available for free or nearly free to everybody that wants the information. Yeah, some of them will bail out, they won't make it through the program, but instead of us deciding they're not good enough, let's educate them and let them decide. Instead of saying, well, you know, unless you're willing to get on an airplane and come to California and put your entire life at risk, you don't have the commitment it takes to be one of our entrepreneurs. I don't want to do that. I want to make it easy. I want to give them instant gratification. And I want to encourage them at every step. I want to provide positive feedback at every step, because we all know there's enough negative feedback for everyone that has a dream. I think it's what I'd like to do. So, you guys have any ideas about how to do it? I'd love to talk to you. So, thanks for listening.
Thanks, Mark. And thank you again for coming back to Bucharest. It's a great privilege to have you around here.
No, it's my pleasure. I love it here.
I'm waiting for your questions, but in the meantime, I want to ask you something. You're talking about 100,000 startups. Can you give us some numbers? I mean, can you tell us how big the impact could be on the world with 100,000 startups in regions like Eastern Europe, Africa, so on and so on?
Well, even if only 1 in 10 succeed, and on average they generate 10 jobs each, the ones that succeed, that's 100,000 jobs, it's 100,000 families that our 10,000 successful startups create. But I think that entrepreneurs can learn even from a failed startup. And if they understand what they're getting into when they do it, and they understand the process, and they have a support system online, a social entrepreneurial support system that doesn't cost them money, but other entrepreneurs can help them, because we know that when somebody's trying to kick the habit of drinking or drugs, working and having other people support them helps. And so if they fail, we can get them to come back and try again, because we've all failed. You know, I've tanked a startup, and it's the worst feeling in the world. And you know too. It's like sawing off a limb. It's like you lose part of you dies with it. And when I sold one of my startups and had a big exit, it was the best feeling in the world. So it's like the worst of times and the best of times. This is the range of human experience. And yet, when I travel around the world, so many countries don't, you know, in the US we idolize great entrepreneurs. It's not the same way everywhere else. Why can't we give them that support system?
So this is totally fantastic, a support system for entrepreneurs that failed.
Sure, failure is just, look, you just discovered one more way it won't work on your way to getting what will work.
Question, guys? Oh, come on. I can go on like that for like 2 hours. One question over here.
Can I would have thought Adobe and large companies like that actually fear startups. I'm obviously wrong. Can you explain?
I love your accent. Can we get a name?
Sorry, Nick Silver. I was speaking yesterday.
Yes, Nick.
Great question, Nick. So I guess there are some incumbent companies that might fear startups. Adobe doesn't, because our business is providing tools to startups and creating authoring tools and creative tools and measurement tools that can help a startup succeed. And so we spend time actually talking about how do we make more startups more successful. You know, how can we get these tools into their hands? Because if they become big, then they become customers for our products. So, you know, I guess it depends on the big company. And ultimately, though, it comes down to the people within the big company. And you know, I've never stopped being an entrepreneur. I may work at a big company, but I always just tell people that's temporary. You know, I just say I'm between startups right now.
Over here.
Actually, I don't have a question. I just have a suggestion for the online pitching thing. Why not do it on Google Plus Hangouts? This way everybody can see each other, and also you can host the videos on YouTube, the one you told about, like demos and stuff. Everybody can see them. And of course you can rely on Google's servers to, you know, Skype is only limiting you at 8, and that's for the paid one. So in Manila they will not pay for Skype. I don't pay for Skype, so.
It's a great idea. I think that using those kind of technologies, particularly technologies that are easy and free, and leveraging those to try to connect entrepreneurs and let them educate themselves and each other is
you can actually put Google Plus to do something useful, because it's just cloning Facebook. So.
Hi, nice speech, by the way. I'm Konstantin from Favid. I want to ask you about yesterday's decision of your company to give up on Flash on mobile devices. How this is going to work on your strategy, as you are the boss of making the strategy of Adobe, and what this will mean for all the developers that are thinking about doing something on mobile, iOS, and Android.
Well, first of all, you know, I didn't talk about Adobe here, and you know, I have to give total credit to Adobe for letting me come out and talk to entrepreneurs. And you know, I just remind you guys, I'm not going to actually say the word Adobe at all. And so I'm sure that somebody back at headquarters appreciates your question. But what we're doing is repositioning the company based on the market. We're listening to our customers, and what we're hearing is that apps and HTML5 are the future, and we've already made big investments in those, and we want to scale those investments and make them even bigger. So it's not really giving up on Flash on mobile, and certainly not on desktop, where we're going to continue to invest. It's more shifting resources so that we can do HTML5 and app development in Flash and support those faster and better. Because you know, there's always resource constraints even in a huge company, and listening to our customers is where we learn to put our resources, just like in a startup. And so listening to our customers has told us we need to shift these resources. And so that's what you're seeing us do, which is respond to the marketplace to try to make sure that we're going to be there to give you guys what you want next year for the people that use our products.
Hi. Back to growing the number of entrepreneurs. I've been thinking about this for a while now, exactly about the same thing. How do we create more entrepreneurs? And one of the bigger questions I have regarding this is: are the current entrepreneurs the result of their own will, or are they the result of the context they lived in?
That's a great question, and I think it's obviously both. The environment shapes the entrepreneur, and the great entrepreneurs tend to shape their environment. But those are the extraordinary entrepreneurs. And we celebrate the extraordinary, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Steve Jobs, we celebrate those guys. Not everyone has to be that. Why are we setting the bar so high? We're idolizing this kind of Superman thing. Not everybody has to leap tall buildings and fly. You can create an incredibly successful business that changes your community and your family without doing that. And so I think in some ways, as heroic and great as they are as an example and as a mascot, this image seems almost unattainable. And I talk to people that are like, they say, I hear people's ideas all the time and they're not really thinking of doing it. And I'm like, why not? Go do it. Well, I'm not like that. And I'm like, what? Oh, I'm not smart enough. And I'm like, look at me. I'm not smart. I mean, it's like we've set this, it's so unattainable. There's a fear to go and try. First, a fear of failure, and then also a fear that you're not good enough. And I think we need to challenge that. It's like great entrepreneurs are driven by insecurity, the fear that they're not good enough. That's fine, but we don't have to make it pathological and have this kind of psychotic, codependent relationship between the entrepreneur and their startup. It's like, look, startups fail. It happens. This is the nature of what we do. There's nothing wrong in that. And so if we could teach people how to fail quicker, where they don't destroy their family and all of their savings, and help them get on the path of the right startup, at the very least, I think, we talked about this last year. You don't lose. When I tanked a startup that was within 48 hours of going public for $650 million, that was the lesson that I learned, right? It's go do it right. And I did the next startup not after the money, but after the experience, because I realized that no matter how I play this, if I'm going in it with the right goal and I understand what I want out of it, that even if the startup fails, I win. I still have a great experience. And I was able to try doing something, and that in itself was enough. So my fear is for the startups that, not the thousands that go out and try to be successful and fail. I worry for the millions that never even try. That is the people we need to bring into the fold and say, it's okay, we can help you. And we're not going to erect a gate that you prove yourself by climbing over. Let's get rid of that idea. Let's just open the funnel. If there's no costs, there's no scarcity of resources, then let's just open it up and see what happens.